Hello and welcome to another episode of the European People's Podcast. I'm Ayla Hotic, EPP Political Advisor on the Middle East and North Africa Affairs. Today, we have the pleasure to host Sami Gemayel, President of the Lebanese Kataib Party. This episode will take a closer look at the situation in Lebanon, a country to which Europe has always been linked historically, politically, economically, and the list goes on. So, welcome, President. We're very glad to have you with us today to discuss several topics about your country, but also Europe from a certain perspective. So, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for hosting me.
Before we get into discussing several topics, I would like just to briefly inform our audience that your party has joined EPP as a partner in 2016. And in the meantime, we had several visits both to Beirut from our side and Brussels from your side to exchange and discuss different issues that your country has been facing over the last years. We have all been following the news in Lebanon very closely over the past months. However, I would like to take you back a bit further into the past and mainly only 1 year ago when the October Revolution started. In the meantime, so many things have happened on national level with the change in government, but also for you as a member of the parliament. You and your party colleagues have decided to resign from your positions as parliamentarians. So, President, could you please give us an overview of what happened since last year and in your opinion, what has led Lebanon to the situation that we all know today? And on a more personal level, what has led you to take such a decision to resign from your position as member of parliament?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for hosting me and giving me this opportunity to explain our country's situation, which is a very difficult one. So I will try to be very brief and say that since 2015, there is a total influence of Hezbollah and the mafia over the Lebanese institutions. So there is this deal that was made in 2015 between the political class, the ruling class, which is very corrupt, and the weapons and the militia of Hezbollah. So this deal between the mafia and the militia has led Lebanon to the total collapse of its institutions and its economy. So we believe that today Hezbollah totally controls the decision making in Lebanon, and this led the country to a lot of sanctions and isolation from its historical friends, such as the Arab countries, Europe, and the United States of America. Today, Lebanon is isolated internationally because a lot of governments consider Lebanon to be a proxy of Iran and a country that is controlled by Hezbollah. And Hezbollah couldn't do that without the blessing of the mafia that is benefiting from the system and that is corrupting the system and led the country's economy to where it is today. So why Lebanon got to this tipping point, it's because of this duel of the duo of the mafia and the militia. And this is what led to the October Revolution 1 year ago. The Lebanese people rose up against this mafia and the militia. And the Lebanese people are still fighting today for change. And we are part of this fight. And we were, since day one, with the Lebanese people in the streets to ask for a state of law, to call for a state of law, and the liberation of our country from any kind of control, especially from Iran and Hezbollah. After the Beirut blast in the 4th of August, this huge explosion that destroyed the port of Beirut and big parts of Beirut, we considered that there is no this explosion should be a tipping point, should be there should be a before and an after, and that we as an opposition, we were too we are a minority, a small minority in the parliament, and we were not able to change anything from within the institutions. And we wanted to draw a very clear line between the mafia that is controlling the institutions and the Lebanese people that are out of the institutions and that are calling, they are calling for a real change in the country. This is why, in order to make this line clearer, we had to resign from parliament because we couldn't change anything from the inside. So we went out and we joined totally the Lebanese people in their fight for a real change, for new election, for to get the Lebanese people back their right to decide their future. So this is why we resigned, and today we are forming a huge coalition, an opposition coalition, with a lot of groups and independent personalities from all religions, from all the regions, to prepare for the next phase, which is the next election in a year and a half.
Thank you, President, for your answer. You mentioned several key points, but I will maybe come back on the Hezbollah issue later on. But before that, I would like just to go back a little bit to what happened after the August 4th explosion. The government of Prime Minister Hassan Diab resigned, and a new cabinet formation talks started under what was called the French Initiative. However, I personally have the impression that we are almost exactly where we were last year, meaning that Saad Hariri has been again appointed prime minister to form a government, and that today the country is facing a deadlock when it comes to government formation. So how do you see the government formation, and what do you think? Will there be a government soon, and at what cost?
Hezbollah managed through elections and with the help of his alliance with the mafia to get a majority in the parliament, which means that Hezbollah controls any government formation. So the French initiative, which is calling for transparency, for reforms, and so on and so forth, is not in the interest of Hezbollah. This is why Hezbollah is blocking any government that goes along with the French initiative, because Hezbollah has the huge majority in the parliament, and he is able to block any kind of government formation that is not in line with his interests and his strategy. So unfortunately, Hezbollah is controlling the institutions, as I said in the beginning of this interview. He is controlling the institutions through his ally, President On, in the presidency. He is controlling the institutions through the majority in the parliament. And through this majority in the parliament, he is controlling the formation of any future government. This is why we believe that after the October Revolution, it is time to go back to the Lebanese people and allow the Lebanese people to elect a new parliament that will enable us to form governments that are more in line with our values, with the program that is needed for Lebanon today to get out of this economic collapse and be a real partner of the IMF, because Lebanon needs the IMF today to get out of this very difficult situation we're in. So Hariri is a hostage of Hezbollah. Hariri cannot, on his own, take any decision, because even if he is the prime minister, the parliament is controlled by Hezbollah, and Hezbollah can impose on Hariri any condition Hezbollah sees in his interest. So this is why we are not positive, and we are not we are not confident that Mr. Hariri will be able to form a government that can be a real partner to the international community.
I have a question because you mentioned economic crisis. Several reports point out that Lebanon's economy is passing through its worst crisis in a century, and the Lebanese pound lost more than 80% of its value, that the GDP shrank drastically, and that the national debt is continuing to grow. So it says it all. But how do the Lebanese people manage to survive in such a situation, given the fact that there is also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy? And so, what is, in your opinion, the way out of the economic crisis, and what would be the solution, in your opinion?
The Lebanese people are not surviving. The Lebanese people are starving, and it's the worst social and humanitarian crisis in Lebanon in his history. So no, the Lebanese people are looking to leave the country. A lot of youth, of young people, a lot of a huge part of our middle class is leaving the country, and this is a huge danger for the future of Lebanon, because Lebanon rely historically on its middle class. And when we say middle class, we say democracy. And when there is no middle class, democracy is in danger, and any possibility to build a state of law becomes very difficult to implement in when we have a problem of middle class. So yes, this is a very it's a big challenge. It's maybe the biggest challenge in the history of Lebanon. And but in the meantime, there are programs. A lot of countries that were in the same situation as ours, such as Greece, for example, is the latest example, managed to get out of their situation with the help of the international community, and by taking the right steps, and by letting the opposition do the cleaning and change the situation on the ground. Unfortunately, in Lebanon, this process that should have been natural in this kind of situation is blocked by the presence of the militia of Hezbollah, that is not allowing Lebanon to go through this process, is not allowing Lebanon to have an early election, so the opposition can take the leadership and start implementing reforms. Second, Hezbollah is preventing Lebanon from dealing with the international community and the IMF, because Hezbollah is in a state of real and profound conflict with the international community, and Hezbollah is preventing Lebanon from dealing with the international community as it should be. So this is what is blocking Lebanon from going through the same process that went through all the countries that had the same difficulties as we have today.
You've been mentioning Hezbollah several times, and as you know, over the past months and weeks, several countries have decided to put it on its list of terrorist organizations. We have seen also sanctions from the US on several Lebanese personalities over the past weeks. So, do you think this is something efficient? Do you think that imposing US sanctions, but maybe also EU sanctions on several Lebanese personalities accused of either corruption or other crimes would or could be a solution to take the country out of the current crisis?
I will be frank with you. If it was a normal situation, we would have been certainly against any kind of interference in Lebanon. But we have to take into consideration that Lebanon and the Lebanese people are hostages today. We are hostages of a militia that is financed by Iran. Their weapons are coming from Iran. And even their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is stating clearly that he takes orders from Iran, and it's not me saying it, it's him. He is saying it clearly and publicly, and it's present on the social media platform. You can see the video where Hassan Nasrallah is clearly stating that his leader is Mr. Khamenei, who is a foreign leader. He is not a Lebanese leader, which means that the problem of Hezbollah is not a local one. Lebanon and the Lebanese people are hostages of this situation. So you cannot ask a hostage to free himself. You have to help him. You have to free him. This is why we think that it is part of the responsibility of the international community to pressure Iran, so Iran can take take out this support from Hezbollah, and then Hezbollah will be like any other party in Lebanon, a party that can express himself freely and go to election and try to win election, but Hezbollah should be on the same level as all the other Lebanese. There should not be any party in Lebanon that has any advantage on the other. For example, and primarily having a militia. Hezbollah is the only party in Lebanon that has 20,000 soldiers on the ground. He can threaten, he can use violence, he can do a lot to make our democracy totally fictive. So today we are not in a state of democracy. We are in Lebanon, and the Lebanese people are in a hostage situation. And this is why the international community should help us free ourselves from this situation. We believe that the more efficient way to do that is not by sanctioning Lebanese personalities, but by pressuring Iran. Because at the end of the day, Iran is the decision maker, and Iran is taking the decisions on behalf of the Lebanese people. All these personalities here in Lebanon are just proxies of Iran. So if you want to go to the core of the core of the problem is in Iran. It's not in Lebanon. I totally understand that countries that are being targeted by Iran and for example, the Arab countries in which Hezbollah has cells acting and being very active and trying to spread violence and spread unrest. I understand that countries like that will not stay silent towards Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is paying the price of its policy and its the way it is dealing with all the actors in the region.
You have mentioned early elections in one of your previous answers, and your party championed the call for early parliamentary elections. And you have been calling for it since more than 1 year now. And I remember this discussion already when you were in Brussels a bit more than a year ago. How feasible is this option now, and what do you hope to achieve with it?
Actually, we believe that after the Lebanese revolution, in the October Revolution a year ago, we believe that the Lebanese people they expressed their will for change, and any country that is a real democracy, when the third of the population go to the street and call for change, the least they can do is organize an election. And unfortunately, this didn't happen. This is why we've been calling for this early election, because we believe that the Lebanese people expressed their will, and it should have been listened long ago. We believe that this is the most democratic and pacific and and institutional way to create change. Because if we don't give this opportunity to the people to go to the ballots and to use the ballots to change, then they will use other means, and these other means could be violent, or they can simply say, it seems that this country is not ours anymore, so let's leave. This is this is the problem. This is why we've been calling for an early election, and today more than ever, Lebanon needs to give back the chance for the Lebanese people to express their will. What's important in this, and I think that the European Union and the EPP should be more vocal on this, because when you call for early election, you are not taking sides between the opposition and the government. You are not saying, I'm with this, or I'm with this person, or I'm with this party, or I'm in this with this position. You are just saying, let the Lebanese people decide their future. This is what we are asking for. We are just saying, let the Lebanese people decide. If the Lebanese people want the same mafia to go back again, then it will be their choice. And if the Lebanese people decide to bring in new faces, competent people, people that are totally free from any interference, then they will have the change they want. But this is in the hands. This should be in the hands of the Lebanese people. At the end of the day, the source of all the institution is the people. So in times of uncertainty, in times of crisis, when you have three huge explosions, the first one, the economic explosion, then the popular explosion with the revolution, and then the real explosion in the port of Beirut, three huge explosions in the history of Lebanon in a year. I think that when you see something like that, you have no right but to impose on the Lebanese people the same ruling class. You have to give the people a chance to hold accountable those who are responsible for these three explosions. So you are not taking sides. You are just calling for the respect of the will of the Lebanese people. And I think that diplomatically speaking, this call is justifiable, it is logical, and it goes with the values of the European Union to call for the respect of the will of the people all over the world. So Lebanon is a suffering people, and Lebanon needs support. Lebanon is hostage. This is why I think that the European Union has a huge role to play, especially that it holds dear to Europe all these values of sovereignty, independence, freedom, and respecting the will of the people all over the world.
Next Sunday, you will be celebrating the party's 84th anniversary, but also the 77th anniversary of Lebanon's independence. What would be your message on this occasion?
Actually, just a few words to say that I don't know if it's the destiny, or or if it I don't know what led to the fact that the same day our party was created in 1936, 17 years later, the independence of Lebanon happened on the same day of the anniversary of our party's foundation. And 60 years later, one of our MPs, Pierre Gemayel, was killed also on the same date. So this date, the 21st of November, is a very dear date for us, because it shows how the history of our party is interlinked with the history of Lebanon, even with the dates. So yes, it's a very important date for us, and it will be an occasion to say once again and call for the liberation of our country from this mafia and this militia that are controlling the future of our children. We are in a sort of political resistance today. It's no longer a political one. It's no longer traditional opposition. We are in a state of resistance because more and more we are seeing Lebanon turning into a police state. It's becoming more and more a dictatorship. The tribunals and the justice system is being used to try to close all the voices, or to shut all the voices that are opposition voices and saying the truth to the Lebanese people. They are being dragged to the tribunals, and unfortunately the judges are nominated by the political power, and this is making things very difficult for us. So we are today in a state of resistance. We are calling for the liberation of our country from this control of Iran, and we are calling for a real change through elections to be able to change this mafia that is controlling our parliament and our government. So mainly, this is what we have to say on this date.
One last question to wrap this episode up. During these difficult times, is there a quote that inspires you particularly and that you would like to share with our listeners?
That's a good question. Actually, my favorite quote since I was very young is still valid until today. And we were talking a few weeks ago about the situation of the Lebanese people, and I remembered this quote, which is my favorite one. Unfortunately, it's in French, so I will have to shift to French to say it. It's a quote from a book of André Malraux. It's called La Voie Royale. And in La Voie Royale, André Malraux says, subir pour subir, autant se battre et voir venir, autant résister et tenir, et en attendant, vivre pour quelques-uns, pour la plupart survivre. So instead of waiting and waiting to see what will happen, let's resist and let's fight. This is my message today. This is what we're doing here in Lebanon. We know that it's a very difficult period for us. So instead of taking the shots, let's at least try to do something. Let's fight. Let's resist, and fight for those who gave their life for Lebanon, and for those who before us did a lot of sacrifices for us to be here. So we will continue our fight, and with the help of Europe, of all those who believe in the same values of freedom, of peace, the values of human rights. I hope with the help of our friends and partners in Europe, we'll be able to get back Lebanon to how it was, a real island of democracy and freedom in the Middle East.
The jewelry of the Middle East, as some say, right?
Thank you.
So thank you, President Gemayel, for your time and your honesty. I would like to wish on behalf of the EPP leadership and all the EPP colleagues a very happy anniversary to the party and all its members, but also a happy Independence Day to to Lebanon and all the Lebanese people, despite these difficult times we are going through. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Leila.
Thanks to all of you for being with us during this interesting interview with the president of the Lebanese Kataib Party, Sami Gemayel. And please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so not to miss the new episodes.